Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to discuss a new kind of number which is called imaginary number I in this system. So before the conversation about this new type of number, let's look at an equation. So we can also use example to review how do we use quadratic formula to solve quadratic equation. So of course, you can always, pause the video to check if you can solve this question on your own and then compare your answer with me. So the first step, as we all know, we need to get 0 for the equation. So we are going to move the 7 to the other side and then rewrite the terms based on the new equation here. And based on what we discussed before, the A, B, and C are just number in front of each, the coefficient from each term. So A is 1, B is -4, do not forget the sign here, and the C is 13. Now we just need to plug into the formula. So as you can see, it's 2A, so 2 times 1. Opposite B, we mentioned before, do not read this as negative B. It's easier to deal with as opposite B. So whatever the number you have here, we just put an opposite sign here. B squared, -4 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 13. Now all we need to do is kind of mental math. We just do this, and 16 minus 52. We just follow the order of operation, and then we get this. So now our answer is simplified as 2 for plus or minus -36. So we're going to stop here a little bit. And some students probably notice there's something wrong here because it's just no way we can find a square root of -36. If you just try it, you can think of this way. Any number squared, is that possible to get -36? No, because any number squared is going to be positive 36, right? There's just no way we can get a negative number. Then question is, how do I deal with this situation? How do I move on to perform new operations within this number? How do I deal with square root of negative number? All this question can be answered by definition of a new number, which is imaginary number. So it's kind of funny because you look like according to the definition, it's look like a not real number. But because of this definition, we can finally moving on to deal with square root of negative numbers. So what is I? I is the notation for imaginary number, and I is defined as square root of -1. So even you put it in the calculator probably going to give you the error message, but in the complex number system, which is part of this, is imaginary number. The imaginary number I defined as square root of -1. So how do I use this symbol to help us to simplify all the expression involving with negative number? So let's see. We have 3 numbers here. As you see, the commonality between these numbers is they are all square root of negative numbers. Let's see how do we do this. So please keep in mind, we already have the definition square root of -1 is I. So we're going to use this to help us to figure it out. Since we have square root of -1 is I, so we're going to break down everything with square root of -1. So instead of -16, I put it 16 times -1, then I have square root of -16 and square root of -1. I just separate this two parts. We know square root of 16, which is 4, and square root of -1 is a definition I, so the final answer is 4I. That's it. Pretty straightforward, right? There's nothing new. It's basically, the only difference is I deal with square root of -1 individually. So same thing here. I'm going to separate that as 18 times -1. Then it's going to be square root of 18 times square root of -1. So we know this is I. So we're going to leave it here for now. And let's deal with square root of 18. Square root of 18 is going to be no way we can find a number to multiply itself to get 18, right? So let's simplify by using the strategy we used before. We're going to use a factor. One of factor is a perfect square number, which is 9 times 2. And then times this little I here. So now I can simplify this square root of 9 to then I. So now I have 3 square root of 2I, or since it's multiplication, so it really doesn't matter where do you put I. So these two answers is actually they are equivalent. Okay, now let's move on to the last one. Last one, again, very similar. We are going to deal with 32 times -1. And some students might say, okay, how do I break down 32? Can I use 4 and 8? Yes, you can, but let me show you. So if we use 4 and 8, and there is a -1 here, so we can break down radical of 4, square root of 8, and this is just I, right? Because definition for square root of -1 is I. Then I have 2 times radical 8, but do not forget, square root of 8 is not really simplified, because square root 8 I can simplify with 2 radical 2. Okay, I just put a side note here, so it's easier for you to understand that how do I get 2 radical 2. You see? So now I can just use it for radical 2i, right? So I can use it. So instead of using 4 and 8, you can also try 16 times 2 times I. So in that case, I have 16 radical 2i. Then final answer, I can write this 4 radical 2i or 4i square root 2. So it really doesn't matter which answer you use. And as you can see, if I use 16 and 2, it just less steps to deal with this situation, right? So this is how do I do this one. Again, 4 and 8 is really nothing wrong, but square root of 8, we just need more steps. Okay, after all the preparation here, we can finally go back to the do now question, the very first question we did before. Let's check. I mentioned, the square root of -36, there's nothing we can do about it. But now, with the definition of I can finally to define this one, to re-simplify this one using I. So it becomes 4 plus or minus, I'm going to put a side note here, is square root of 36 and -1, so it's going to be 6i, right? So instead of using square root of -36, it's going to be 4 plus or minus 6i. Then the two solution will simplify as 4 over 2 plus or minus 6i over 2. So I have two solutions here. So the first one is 2 plus 3i. How do I do this? 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6i divided by 2 is 3i. And the other one is obvious, it's just minus 3i. So as you can see, we have two new solutions using I to represent it. Okay, this video is just very brief introduction of the imaginary number. In next video, we are going to do more practice for that. So come back soon. See you soon, everyone.